All right, now we're moving on to the concept of the image of God in human beings. And this is a great topic because ultimately, what makes us valuable as human beings and the most valuable of God's creation? And it's the fact that we're made in the image of God. Now, here's a couple of things about this. First, text like Genesis 1:26, it says, God made us in his image and likeness, okay? Let us make man in our image after our likeness. And we see this repeated throughout Scripture. I mean, after the fall, we didn't lose the image of God, because in a text like Genesis 9:6, it says that, if you shed man's blood, by man your blood will be shed because he's in the image of God. So we retain the image of God after the fall of Adam. But the question is, what is it? Well, there's a couple of things. Let's look at the Hebrew and Greek terms. The basic idea is the Hebrew term selim means image or likeness. The Greek term eikon, which we get icon, means image, likeness, form, or appearance. The Hebrew demuth means likeness or similitude, and the Greek homoiosis means likeness or resemblance. So you put these two together, and I'm not going to go into the image and likeness, how it's different. It's really, if you want to talk about it, is God made us as much like himself as he could possibly make us. And we are, very important here, likeness. We are similar to God. Okay, homoiosis. We are similar in nature to God. And the image part is that we represent God somehow. Okay, so that's image and likeness together. We're similar to God and we represent God. Now, some illustrations, for example, we're on roughly about page 14 of the anthropology handout. And for example, the word image is used in certain Babylonian paintings of soldiers. Again, seeing the representation of the soldier, that was an image, okay, in the painting. Or a statue of Nebuchadnezzar, that's an image. It represents something, okay? So that's really the word image comes to, where likeness is really comparing traits, similarities. For example, King Ahaz's model of the altar he saw in Damascus is called a likeness, 2 Kings 16:10. And the venom of the wicked is a likeness of the venom of a snake. So all that means is likeness is introducing similarity, okay? How similar are two kinds of things. So theologically considered, though, we want to break this down a little bit. So what does it mean to be in the image of God? Ultimately, I've mentioned this in Essential Christian Doctrine 1. We talked about attributes of God. But the key that I think we can make the case is that being in the image of God means this. We would distinguish what's called the ontological image and the functional image. Ontological image would be as human beings, as rational substances, created to represent God and be similar to God. What does that mean? I think that the case is that God gave human beings every communicable attribute he could give us and still be created. So hence we are the fullness of God's creation in the sense that we have every possible attribute that God could give a created being and still be created. So that would be the ontological image of God, as we are as similar, we represent God as much as possible. We are as similar to God as much as possible in being, okay? Now this is important, and again, when I talk about Trinitarianism, we distinguish the ontological image of God from the functional image of God. And the functional image of God ultimately is this, where as human persons, okay, who are persons substantively, again, made like God, how are we supposed to imitate God? So that's the functional image of God. And when we look at the functions of divine persons, we find out that there's an eternal intra-Trinitarian righteous love relationship that goes on. And so hence you have loving righteous community going on with God from all eternity. And so to function in the image of God ultimately is to do what? Pursue love and holiness and righteousness, and to enjoy the company of other holy and righteous and loving beings. So to love and be loved, to treat others righteously and have others treat you righteously is the apex of being blessed, or in a state of blessedness. So again, that's why I mentioned that Trinitarianism is imitating the love relationship of the Trinity. By this all men will know you're my disciples, that you have love for one another. Whereas if you have a Unitarian God, the ultimate state of existence for that kind of a God, a one-person God, is to be by yourself and all alone, because that is the complete and perfect state that God has always been in. So while a Unitarian version of the image of God would be similar to a Trinitarian version with respect to the ontological image, function is going to be a little bit different. We talk about the functional image. Again, Trinitarianism will emphasize, we've got to study and show ourselves approved and exercise intelligence and thought in our mind, but existing in love relationships in community is put at the apex here. Whereas for the Unitarian, being by yourself all alone, thinking important thoughts, that really is the imitation of your God. So you're not going to value love and relationships as much as you would in a Trinitarian system based on the functional image of God. Now, a couple of notes here for personhood. Again, go back and review this when I talked about the doctrine of God in Trinitarianism, because this is a review. But when we think about what it would mean to be in the image of God as a human person, it would simply be this, that in our soul/spirit, we have the powers of intellect, will, and affections, okay? And this capacity or power of deliberation and thought, or appetite and choice, or feelings or affections that we have, we start with the concept of what distinguishes humans, say, from a gorilla, a chipmunk, a roach, because you might argue that every single one of these creatures or beings, again, you can make a case that a gorilla or a dog is a person, just not a morally responsible, rational person. So what we would say is, to be made in the image of God, God would somehow place in our intellects, while our intellect is the capacity to think, we would divide up that capacity to think into subcapacities. For example, the capacity to be self-aware, for example, is a capacity of a human being in the image of God. It's also a capacity of a dog, okay? Now, eventually you go down the list and you compare a doggy intellect to a human being intellect. Eventually you get to the point where human beings clearly have second-order thoughts. We can think about, I'm hungry, but then should I eat? You can have a second thought after a first thought. Arguably, human beings are unique, even though you might, maybe some examples in higher primates of, can you have abstract thought? Okay. One of the things we have is moral responsibility, free choice, the capacity to appreciate and create beauty and aesthetics. Okay. All of those would be subcapacities of the human soul that make us more like God than, again, other types of animals like apes and chimps and dogs. So for that, we think about being in the image of God, those would be those communicable attributes that are part of our capacities. And so, again, very important that the value of human beings is based on what we are in our essence and these capacities we have. Indeed, some people use their minds more than others. Some people create more than others. Some people work harder than others. But remember, when we think about what it means for all human beings to be equal in value, it's not because we're all using the capacities at the same level, because functionally, some people are worthless. Our essence, the fact is we all have the same capacities as human beings in the image of God. We can say that all human beings are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, among them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Again, that's not, functional equality. That's essential equality that we have, all having the capacities of being in the image of God. So again, very important that that's grounded in ultimately in the capacities of the soul, because if you look at, if we're nothing more than our bodies, okay, the fact is that bodies are taller, they're shorter, have more abilities or less abilities, but the capacities of our souls as human beings, again, is a basis for our equality. One last note on the image of God, again, and again, this is also in the syllabus, but we think about this, there's different aspects to the image, like again, the moral aspect, the spiritual aspect, relational aspects. Interesting though to bring up, what about being physically in the image of God? Because we know God is pure spirit. God says in John 4:24, God is spirit, and he that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. So that's number one. God doesn't have a physical body. God is pure, infinite, immutable spirit. So what does it mean to be made in the image of God and to have a physical body? And while we could talk a lot about this, is that because we have these great, fine, higher capacities, God gives us a body with, for example, stereoscopic vision. We can see color. We're bipedal, so we can use our hands. We have dexterous thumbs. All these things to do what? To express these higher mental capacities that we have being made in the image. That's why man walks upright. We have dexterity. We have all these things that can indicate our, again, our creativity, our uniqueness as human beings. That's why it's interesting that you start watching movies about space aliens and things like that. What do you have? Essentially, what was it, Independence Day? You have essentially squids building spaceships, with tentacles, when the fact is, to have that kind of mental capacity, you would have to have a body that matches that mental capacity to be able to express, again, fine dexterity and thoughts and so forth. So that's why, again, image of God, probably the human body best translates into how to express the image in the physical world, even though God is not a physical being. So anyway, next time I'm going to look at the concept of intellect and will and emotions in the heart. We'll finalize looking at the concept of what it means to be made in the image of God and what is included in the human constitution. Thanks.